Now that we've spent a little time talking about JavaScript functions, this would be an appropriate time to now discuss the scope and lifetime of variables. We've talked about variables quite a bit previously. We know that variables have attributes. The attributes of variables that we've discussed previously are the variable's name, the variable's value, and the variable's data type. All three of those pieces of data, all three of those attributes can be used to describe any particular variable. What we haven't talked about yet is the fact that every variable also has a scope and a lifetime. Now, the scope of a variable defines the parts of the script that will be able to see and use any particular variable. The lifetime of a variable basically describes the amount of time while the script is running that a variable actually exists in the computer's memory. For example, when we declare a variable, the variable comes into existence. That's therefore the beginning of its lifetime. Scope and lifetime are both going to be defined based on where it is that we actually declare a variable. So declaration of the variable is going to be very important where we actually put that declaration, because it's going to determine what the scope and the lifetime of that variable is going to be. And as far as scope goes, there are essentially two different scopes in JavaScript that we'll be concerned with. One of them is called the global scope. The other one is called the local scope. The global scope is what we get whenever we declare a variable outside of any function. Global variables then can be seen by virtually any part of a script. Local variables, on the other hand, are variables that are declared inside a function, and those variables, because they are local, declared there inside the function, can really only be used by that function. Alright, what I have here for us is a little example that I've typed up to demonstrate scope and lifetime. Basically what I have is I of course have the code open here in TextMate in my text editor, and I've scooted it a little bit over to the side so that over here behind it we can actually see the output from this script in my browser. What we actually have over here in the code is in the head section I have a set of script tags running from here to here, and inside those script tags I have a function called f1 which is passed one argument, one value. We'll come back and take a look actually in detail at what that function does here in a minute, but for now I'm going to scroll down to the body section. What we have down here in the body is another set of script tags. Inside these script tags, what I've done is I've declared two global variables, and I've put a comment in marking them both as being global. These variables are called x and y and are assigned the values of 10 and 11 respectively. So those two variables come into existence, their lifetime starts at that point in the script. More or less that point would come after the browser had started opening this document, had read down to this part of the script, and then had seen those two variables. Those two come into existence, their scope starts, their lifetime starts, all that good stuff. The next thing that happens in the script is I actually call my function called f1, and when I do I pass it the numeric literal 1 as its only value, as the only parameter being passed to it. So let's go take a look at what actually happens when I call that function. The value of 1 that I pass, you can see, comes up and goes into the variable here that I've called x. Now right there, that's the first little trouble spot. The fact that I have a variable called x here inside my function f1, and I have a variable x here that's declared globally. This doesn't actually bother JavaScript at all. What it's actually going to do is it's going to perform an operation called variable hiding. Essentially what happens is JavaScript doesn't mind if you have two variables with the same name, just so long as they're in different scopes, which is exactly what's happened here. I have one x variable that's in the global scope and another x variable that's in the local scope. The x variable here that goes along with the function f1 is considered to be local since it actually is a part of that function. Moving along then, the first thing that actually happens here in my function f1 is that I create another variable called z and I assign it the value of 12. That particular variable is also going to be local to this function. After that, I then have this big long collection of document.write lines. The first one and the last one actually print out starting and ending paragraph tags. All the other document.write lines that take place between them then will of course output their content, output their strings between those two paragraph tags, so that's the way it'll appear in the browser. The next thing that happens is I print out the string in function f1, and you can see it over here in the browser, in function f1. Then what I do is I print out x equals literal, and then I print out the actual value of x. And that's kind of the first big question then, is when I print out the value of x here, which x is going to print? Well, you can see that what actually printed here in the output was 1, the value of 1 for x. That value was actually the value of the x variable that was local here to the f1 function. Whenever the browser performs variable hiding a global variable in favor of a local variable with the same name, it will always take that local variable in preference. So that's exactly what's happened here, is it's taken the local version of x and essentially ignored the fact that there's also an x variable in the global scope that has a value of 10. The next thing that happens is I print out y equals and then the value of y. Now in this particular case, there is no y variable here inside my function, no local copy of y. So what the browser will do is it will happily at that point use the global copy of y. Global variables can be seen anywhere throughout a program, so since y was created here before the function f1 was called, y was in existence, it was in scope because it's global, so here the browser was happy to use that global copy of y, which has a value of 11 and was actually output here to the browser. The next thing that happened is a pretty simple little statement. I just printed out, oops, I've got y there, that should be z equals. Right? Z equals, and then I print out the value of z. Well, obviously there's only one z in this program. It's the local variable z here inside my function, so that's of course what it prints out. Let me refresh my browser here. There we go. So it actually prints out z. And that's pretty much it. We've got our closing paragraph tag. The only other thing that happens inside function f1 here is that we assign a value of 100 to x. I just threw that in to make sure that it was clear that anytime we refer to the variable x here inside the function, we're referring to the local copy. So when I put 100 into x here, that 100 is replacing the 1 that was in the x that was passed to the function. The x that was global down here remains unchanged. It was being ignored while we were in that function, so it did not have its value changed. Once the function f1 is complete, the next thing that I do is I print out the value of x, and you can see it does print out 10, the value of the global variable. Here it's using the global variable because in this particular scope it is the only one that exists. It's also the only one that exists at that point due to lifetime. The variable x that was created up here for my function actually expired. It went away as soon as that function ended. Any local variables that you create inside a function come into existence at the beginning of the function and go out of existence at the end of the function. So by the time we get back down here to this document.writeLine where we're printing out the value of x, there is only one x variable that exists, and that of course is the one with the value of 10, which prints out here. Knowing that, this last line then probably isn't too much of a mystery. Here I'm trying to print out the value of z. Now you remember I did have a z variable, but that z variable was local to my f1 function, so it had gone away. It was out of scope, out of lifetime by the time that we actually got to this statement, so there was no z variable to print, and sure enough nothing came up. If I actually pull up the error console in my browser, oops, which it doesn't look like I have turned on, but that's okay. I'll cover the error consoles in another episode. We would be able to see that at that point the browser is actually issuing an error saying that it's unable to find a variable called z.